We'll make a start. So I declare the council meeting CL25 Bar 8 open and welcome everyone here. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and the consequences of that. I shall begin my usual karakia. Whakatau mai te warua, whakawātea mai te hinanaru, whakarite mai te tinana, kia ea ai ngā mahi. Ai. I have an apology from Councillor Henry. Can I remove it and second for that, please? Councillor Joyce, Councillor Murray Benge. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. There are no late items to consider. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of conflict of interest? No? Okay, thank you. There are no public excluded items and there's no public forum. So we move on to our first report, which is on page 7, and that's the Tourism Bay of Plenty half-yearly report to 31st December 2024 and statement of intent 25-26 to 27-28. So I'll ask Jodie to come forward, please, and note that we have a couple of external presenters in Oscar Nathan and Richard Fair. So Jodie, perhaps you could introduce them properly.
Morena elected members. I'd like to present today Oscar Nathan, General Manager of Tourism Bay of Plenty, and Richard Fair, Head of Insights and Data at Tourism Bay of Plenty, to present their 6-monthly report to December 2024.
Morena tātou, tēnā rā tātou I huihui mai nei I tēnei ata e nunui mō tātou. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and present our 6-monthly report to you all. Appreciate this is a very big day, so we will try to keep it succinct. So succinct, in fact, that I'm going to pass the speaking duties over to Richard, who will run you through the presentation, and then I will answer any of the questions that you might have following that. So kia ora and thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. Right, we'll get straight into it. So we have 10 KPIs here. All of them are on track. I did want to just talk about a few of them with you at the moment, especially the first one, the economic well-being. So we've definitely seen a softer domestic market right across the board, and that's being felt right across New Zealand, just challenging economic conditions with discretionary income for tourism. However, the real achiever here is the international visitor spend. So you can see there it's gone up quite a bit, 16% year on year. We're now at 86% of arrivals in the country compared to pre-COVID. So that Chinese market's taking a little bit more to get back into New Zealand, but overall we're pretty pleased with the visitor spend here. Cultural wellbeing, that's an ongoing process, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But obviously, Manawa Falls is a key project that we've been working on that. TBOP staff wellbeing, so here we're at 89%. We've just completed another survey, and that's now at 94%, so that's actually gone up, pleasing enough. Destination marketing, I've got a report. Part of this will be on the Flavours of Plenty Festival that we had, very successful, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Our marketing initiatives continue, especially on the domestic front to promote into other regions. Social wellbeing, again, that's tracking above the target. And also with our environmental wellbeing, our Green Room sustainability program, we've now completed 135 organisations that have gone through that. So that's the largest of any region in the country. Our Cycleways continues with the brochure that we do on that one, and obviously destination management. The last one there, just on business events. So this is a real driver for us moving forward. You'll see there, as of writing this report, we had 3 confirmed bids. So I can now give you an update on that, and this isn't a typo. We now have 30. So that's from 3 to 30. So that's largely been achieved by a very strong pipeline, making sure that we get more events, especially in off-peak and shoulder, to really grow the year-round visitor economy. So again, I was just alluding to this a little bit before. You can see there 2 graphs. The one on the left refers to domestic visitation. The one on the right is international. And this again just highlights the challenges that the domestic market is having compared to international. Western Bay, you guys are actually leading the charge even more. So that figure I presented was combined. But if you look at that, you're up 27%, which is very significant. Cruise, you will have read a lot in the media about cruise. There was a study conducted nationally and broken down regionally on the value of cruise. For the Bay of Plenty, it's just under 112 million on direct and indirect economic output. This last season, we had 91 ships and 163,000 passengers. I'm pleased to say that although we've got less ships next season, they are bigger ships, and we're sitting at about 165,000 passengers. So it's really pleasing to see that that's fairly stable. Flavours of Plenty. So this is big news for us. We actually won the Industry Collaboration and Alignment Award at the Tourism Awards. So we were the only RTO in one category, and we had to share that category with two entries. So we're really pleased that Flavours took out this category. And this is just a snapshot of some of the key KPIs and metrics from the Flavours of Plenty event. So we had 162K of ticket revenue, 51 events, and 921 additional bed nights over the event. In terms of looking forward and how satisfied people were as well. So again, very high metrics here, 89% satisfied with their experience and 85% likely to attend next year as well. Again, of the businesses that were involved, 94% have indicated they're happy to be involved again. And these are some of the key KPIs from Western Bay, and just in terms of their involvement. And again, I won't go through that whole list, but we've ticked all of them there to say that we've achieved them. And from a Western Bay perspective, we had 23 businesses involved, and you can see them on the screen there, all making very, very good inroads in this market. And I mentioned we had two entries in the one category. This is the second category, the green room there. And I mentioned that before. So 135 businesses have gone through that project now. So we're really pleased about that. And then just lightly touching on some of our other work streams here, from eyesight operations, online platforms, international marketing, digital and social campaigns, that bid and lead generation for events that we see strong growth coming from, our PR, marketing and media hosting, our research programs. We have a comprehensive research program that tracks sentiment, visitor sentiment, as well as local and business sentiment, which also helps if we have new startups wanting to come into the region and they want to know more about the economic conditions and where the opportunities are, we can provide that. And then I talked about Manawa Falls having joint venture initiatives here, and native nations as well. So just an update on governance. So we bid farewell to Claire and Jason. So their time wraps up on the 30th, and we have two new trustees who will be joining us, which I believe will be ratified very soon. So our financial position, compared to budget, from July to December, we had a 72K favourable position. Looking forward to the end of the financial, 200K deficit. However, that is covered by reserves, and we're managing that. We've also seen that our equity ratio is within that range as well. Jody also mentioned you're keen to have an update on the Regional Event Promotion Fund. So Tourism Bay of Plenty coordinates all the applications for this, and we're pleased to have those two there confirmed. So the Eco Walking Festival at 10,000 and the Kirikiri Avocado Festival at 8,000. Now I've raced through that fairly quickly, but now happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Richard. I'll open up to questions, and I see Councillor Coxhead first.
Thank you for that. Just a little bit of, I guess, a out there kind of question, really. But have you ever considered, or have you considered the upcoming changes to the eligible investor category in New Zealand, and the possibilities that might be able to be leveraged from that in terms of investment in tourism in the area? So attracting those international investors?
Probably not in detail, but it's interesting because actually Richard and I, it's about a month ago, I think, we attended one of the major developers in the region, house builders actually. They're looking to expand because obviously there's no use building a lot of communities and homes if there's nothing to do in and around them or activity. So that's probably a conversation that we can explore a bit more with them. We haven't really gone into that at this stage because that's quite new. But then, you know, I'm not sure. We've also got the Western Bay, the international group there might be something that might come from that, maybe.
Yeah. So I attended yesterday just an international strategy outcomes, and that was raised to some degree. From where we're sitting, it's about joining the dots. So we note that international investing, you know, obviously there's a package involved when they want to come over and set up everything. That the order that we were told is they first want to know about the schools, make sure that they're very strong, that they can get access to good housing, and our role really is joining the dots between everything from education to tourism opportunities. And again, this is where our research program really taps into that. So if there is an opportunity and they want to know more, we've got quite a significant amount of research that we can offer to help them.
It's probably something that Priority One is already looking at in terms of leveraging as well, I would imagine.
Yes, yeah. So they're coordinating a lot of the international outcomes for that, yeah.
Councillor Murray-Bench.
Have we got enough accommodation for the growth in tourism that's going to come here in Tauranga?
Ideally, we would like a lot more, and you know, there are developments underway that are you know, adding 100 rooms here in terms of hotels and so forth. Our biggest accommodation provision across the region is actually Airbnb and houses, people sort of allowing people to stay in their houses in that manner. Then the holiday parks are our second largest. So to answer your question, yes, we do want more accommodation. We're conscious about the constraint and the issues around sort of housing generally. But one of the biggest issues that we find, despite our sort of achievement with some of the business events results, that people don't choose to come to our region is the perceived lack of commercial accommodation. So it is a constant. So the answer is yes, we do need more. Yeah.
Councillor Murray-Bench, did you want to add that?
Can I ask you about the cruise industry at this stage?
I'm conscious you've got a busy day, so I won't speak too long. But yeah, so it would be fair to say that the efforts of our efforts locally, as well as efforts that have happened nationally. So again, I think many of you are aware I'm on the board of Cruise New Zealand as well for the exact purpose of improvement in that space. It would be fair to say that the Minister and the new focus from the government acknowledging tourism as a short lead economic driver and growth opportunity is working to our favour. So whilst in the previous government, there were some negative messages sent out around cruise in terms of some of the impost costs around accessing New Zealand and such, and that's had that sort of decline. So whilst we've had the decline in the number of cruise ships for next season, the size of the cruise ships coming to us are bigger. So we're actually sustaining that. But it would be fair to say that the new Minister of Tourism and Hospitality has had the message put clearly to her of the importance of cruise. I was in attendance at a meeting that we co-hosted with Rotorua, and we had Mayor Denyer there, and Mayor Drysdale was there as well. And we were very clear about championing cruise. And one thing which you may not know, which is quite a faux pas really, is cruise statistics officially are not recorded by the government in terms of inbound arrivals. So if cruise was a country in its totality, it would sit somewhere between the US and the UK in terms of total numbers. So that's something that we're trying to make sure happens, because once cruise is officially on the record, then it will also start getting a lot more support. So that's what's happening.
And have they got the message about the need for raising costs with a lead-in time to match the 2-year program of the cruise ships planning?
Definitely. So what Councillor Benj is referring to there is the fact that unfortunately under the previous government, or anyway, the regime at the time made some calls that were quite short-sighted. And whilst cruise globally they're not afraid of costs. They're big businesses, they're big entities. What does frustrate them is when that lead time is short. And there was some calls that were made that were very short, and that has resulted, if you think about it, they've globally got all these big billion-dollar vessels going around the planet. They simply redirect them to where it's easier to do business or easier to sell in advance. So we are probably going to, this season, I'm hoping that the decline in total visitor cruise ship arrivals will start to plateau out, and the following season will start to sort of settle and then come back up again. And that blip happened as a result of short-term thinking. So this government's definitely tightening that up and putting those messages out. And another factor is, for the first time ever, Miami Sea Trade, which is the biggest cruise trade show on the planet that happens each year, for the first time ever, 8 ports from New Zealand had representation alongside Cruise New Zealand up and Miami Sea Trade. That was New Zealand, despite some of the government decisions, that was the New Zealand businesses, the ports themselves, going up to where the business is done, saying cruise is important to us. So that was great. Yeah.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you for the updates and the report. I just had a question based on the progress against KPIs, particularly under cultural wellbeing. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this is sort of Bay of Plenty wide, but I just note there that it speaks of Tauranga Moana cultural history only. Would there be any reason that Te Arawa is not part of there?
Yes, sorry. Good point and correction. Should have had referencing in terms of Maketu and Te Arawa Waka. Absolutely, it is cultural interpretation and storytelling. So a written mistake in there, but definitely in terms of the storytelling, absolutely, because you can't have the landing of Te Arawa Waka and not talk about it.
I definitely agree Tauranga Moana's importance, but I just felt that there was a bit missing. But thank you.
We can make that more complete. Yep.
Councillor Joyce.
Just really interested. I mean, the importance of cruise to our economy is huge, but are our facilities at the port up to it? Because it just seems they stop there. It's a beautiful vista for them, and everybody just piles out in the wharf. And the wharf is a cruise one, has cruise facilities for the day, and then just it's all pop up and gone.
Yeah, it's similar to having should there be a super stadium on the Auckland waterfront? It's how long a piece of string is. Where we do really well, and this comes up nationally. So out of the 14 ports that the cruise ship passengers disembark on when they visit New Zealand, Tauranga is the #1 visitor satisfaction rated port. And So where we do well, despite not having a dedicated cruise passenger facility or terminal, what they absolutely love is the fact that they see Moao in the distance, that they track that as they come in, that vista, the ability to, we are the only port outside of one other, smaller one down south, that allows people to disembark directly off the port. Most people, if they do have to do that, put straight onto coaches and driven off to an alternate location and treated there. What they absolutely adore here is that they can get off and walk. And that's why probably the bigger issue for us, and in fairness to the Port of Tauranga, they work really well with us and balance their business as much as possible, because cruise sector and the very lucrative kiwi fruit sector both like a particular end of the port, i.e. berths 1, 2, and 3. During COVID, unfortunately, when cruise wasn't happening because of COVID, but kiwi fruit was still growing and being distributed, a cool store was sort of put in place in and around that berths 1 and 2. So it was kiwi fruit sector's way of stamping their mark and being there. But to the credit of the port, we work in with them in ways that still keeps that satisfaction rating up, and it doesn't impede the business. My personal preference, it would be lovely if we did have a dedicated facility quite close by, maybe at the back of Coronation Park, that people could still get off, but quickly disembark or get to the park and then be treated there, particularly in inclement weather. But again, how long is a piece of string? Yeah.
The only other thing I was going to say is Tracy's idea of inbound investment, and Margaret's question on hotels seems like a marriage that
Absolutely.
needs to happen.
Councillor Thwaites.
That's good. Good morning. Do you have any work in progress to try and levy more to the actual users of your tourism activity? I'm thinking like a levy on the users, like the farmers pay and the orchards pay and the forestry people pay. Because in an hour's time, we're about to oppose rates for $104 million over our district. 460,000 goes to you, so at 0.4%. And we're hearing time and time from central government, stick to your knitting, do your basics. And this is starting to get to be a big number. And I'm wondering, what work are you doing? Why aren't the hotels paying? Why aren't the motels paying? Why aren't the shops paying more levy? I realise Tauranga City, they pay massive commercial differentiation, and maybe that's the difference between the Tauranga ones and us. So sorry for a long-winded speech, but do you have any work in line to lessen the reliance on the big farm in the back of the Kaimais or the back of Pongakawa to fund your activities? Because they just don't get the benefit, but rates are unfair, and that's where it falls on them big time.
Yeah. Great question, and I completely appreciate the pressures. I suppose what we are doing is we're exploring what we can within the remit of what we've got. And a lot of the conversation we're having at central government level is really looking at where they can and do put more funding into regional tourism entities and things like that. The funding at a local level, how you strike that rate, whether it comes under an economic rate and its percentage of or whatever, that's probably a bigger discussion. What we are also doing is where we are having to put on additional service over and above, where there's some direct beneficiaries, for instance, if I use the example, cruise. So whilst everyone may not sort of directly benefit from cruise, and we work very hard to facilitate cruise operations on the days that people arrive, operators do pay over and above for that privilege. So we do have somewhat of a user pay mechanism. The other conversation, and I completely get it, government generally takes about 90% of the total tax take in the country and, delivers, nowhere near that, whereas local councils, take 10 and probably expected to deliver 30%. So we are, the other thing that we're also exploring with government is it's a conversation. They won't say it, that it's not due to come up this term, but we are definitely working behind the scenes on a national conversation around a user levy, if that makes sense, or a user pays levy. So what does that mean in English? Any of you that have recently been to Europe or been to sort of countries that do tourism in a big way, within certain services provided, there's simply a visitor levy attached within your receipt. That very much makes sure that it's the people that are using the experience are paying for the experience, and also part of the dollars spent stays there as a percentage. That's a big conversation. That's a national conversation, but we are having it with the government, to the point that about 3 months ago, we in Queenstown, we pulled together the heads of Ireland tourism and Scotland tourism, who have actually put that very process through legislation. So I hear what you're saying. We are where we can be fair about user pays and extracting more money, so that we're not simply delivering extensive services to particular smaller groups. We are doing it within our control, but there's bigger conversations around how tourism's funded, and that's a national conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for the report, and in fact, that opening picture of Waihi Beach. Anyway, basically, I have two questions really. One is, how are you seeing any situations that we hear of internationally, I guess, and in particular in parts of Europe, about overexposure now? I don't believe we're sitting in that area yet, but is that something that you're being aware of, and is it something that you are able to manage?
Yes, through our not only sort of our current strategy in Te Hātāpui, our regional tourism sort of platform, but to be clear, we are nowhere near the over-tourism of Spain or France. So we just, those numbers are incomprehensible to what we just don't have the capacity into New Zealand, full stop. So I think it's more a case of where there's seasonality that puts pressure on local resource is probably where we zone in and focus. But the scale and some of the activity that's happening in some of those countries where you're getting, you know, and rightfully so, you're getting residents revolting because they can't afford to live in the city that they love themselves. We aren't anywhere near that in that respect for over-tourism.
The other part or question I have then is back to the local market. And again, I mentioned where I'm from, and to me, it's something that I've had to start to stand up for in here, that Waihi Beach is quite different to the rest of the district. It is our one area in the district that is very much visitor focused. I'm interested as to whether there's more or some direction, and it doesn't necessarily have to come to us here in public, that I can encourage our locals to participate more with you perhaps, or get more knowledge on what's available externally within New Zealand, that we should be getting people to increase our visitor numbers. Are there things that we can still do? Are there opportunities?
Definitely. There's no silver bullet solution in respect to that, but we very much understand the nuance of Waihi Beach in terms of the seasonality issue, but there's some great localized initiatives that are underway, both from the sustainability perspective. I remember maybe 2 or 3 years ago going there with the launch that I think it was ex-Prime Minister Helen Clark was launching there around the sustainability. There's other programs that our team are involved with supporting Waihi Beach businesses at the moment as some things are being developed. We're also in conversation around working smarter with some of our digital kiosk reach in terms of information, both a provision from council and also visitor information. But yes, there are some programs that we've got on our agenda to continue to have the chat with Waihi Beach about, because fortunately you've got some really, really great operators that are quite proactive about making the community quite distinctive to the rest of New Zealand, and we are working there as much as we can. So, but wider programs at this point, if we see anything that's worthwhile, we'll definitely communicate it. But there's no silver bullet. Yeah.
Thank you,
Keep in
Oscar.
touch.
So I see there's 5 recommendations. So I'm looking for a mover and second for those 5 recommendations. I see Councillor Murray Bend and Councillor Sol. Before I put the motion and ask if anyone wants to say anything else, I just want to thank you, Oscar, and your team, alongside Russ and the governance body, for delivering some great results for us. And we wish you all the best for the future. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming in. But are there any other speakers who want to say? Councillor Murray-Bench.
I'd really like to speak because I think Tourism Bay of Plenty has grown up. And the other week I was up at Emmanuel Falls. Now, I didn't get back to the falls, which I've done in the past, but the car parking and the cafe there, it's welcoming. And so we're organising for arrows to go on the road to make sure that tourists who are coming in and they love to wander, stick to the right side of the road. And that's for Emmanuel, McLaren's and Pori Pori. And could I just say at the same time, Mr. Mayor, McLaren Falls is one of the jewels as well, and I think it needs attention. I just think you had a look at Emmanuel, and I suggest McLaren Falls is such an icon, it's worth looking at as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? No, in which case I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Richard.
Kia ora, everybody, and good luck to you all too. Kia ora.
So now we move on to page 53 and the report titled General Rates Changes to 2025-26 Annual Plan. And we have Adele and Jonathan, our CFO, to present this one. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the Mayor. So the purpose of this report was to identify some changes that have occurred since the draft annual plan going through our final annual plan. It's a normal part of our process to do those reviews and checks. But in addition to that, we've identified some other changes that we wanted to make you aware of that then flow through into the final number that we'll discuss shortly. This is in advance of obviously the discussion for the adoption of the annual plan paper. So this is the underlying information that has been changed and the reasons why. So I'll just step you through that. So in the report, you'll find a table that is a 4-year view. It's not typically shown as part of a normal annual plan process, but it does show you the impact of the changes over a number of years that will be addressed in the future years as well. In relation to the current year, I'll just talk through the adjustments as they stand. So the general rates for the last financial year, we ended up in a general rates deficit. This was noted through the annual report process to council. When it initially went into the planning documentation, it was actually put in as a default loan of 25 years. And we noted that the recommendation from council was to have that over a 3-year period. So this was adjusted in the final. At the time of the development of the annual plan too, we hadn't actually settled on a weather-tight loan matter. Subsequent to that, in part of the final, we have included that amount, which is a repayment over a 3-year period. And this has been now included in our final documentation. We also went through the process of reviewing our loan repayment schedules and noted that there were some that had not been included and also newly created loans for our ERP and for our HRE system. And so the impact of the inclusion of those loans over the period for 26 was 2.3 million with a further 0.7 million over the following 2 years. As part of the process of our annual plan, we have additional submissions that are presented to council through our issues and options papers. And these were funding requests that came through to council for inclusion, which were approved. And these were $185,000. As part of our focus on regulatory over the last couple of years, and as all councils have experienced, there have been some challenges in terms of the downturn. We had initially put through some savings into our regulatory function for salaries. However, when we put through the final, for the draft, we also included those in the salary number. So in part of our draft review process, our final review process, we removed that double up, and that was 0.7 million. There's two further identified matters of rebuilding our reserves, one for the waste levy and one for our general rates reserve. So at the end of last financial year to the 30 June 24, the balance of our general rates reserve was $738,000. We'd like to maintain that for those unplanned events. And so we think it's prudent to rebuild that reserve over the next few years and have noted that as part of our approach. We'd also like to rebuild our weather-tight reserve, noting that this is prudent as well and undertaken by most councils around the country. And we've provided for an additional 0.4 million. The other matters are in relation to our health insurance. Those escalations weren't noted at the time of the draft and have been included. And our operational carry forwards have been noted there. To offset those costs, council undertook a number of council staff undertook some reviews across the board, and we've made the following changes. One was to reduce our bad debt expense. We've looked at potential savings in our transport area. This was in relation to cost efficiencies on the completion of the cycleway project from Tauranga to Onmakara. And those could be realised as part of also being bought in-house through the year. The HR system loan, so we'd looked at what we could provide there and noted it could be funded over a 5-year period rather than shorter. To increase council's liquidity, we've also looked at the option of selling shares. This went through the Audit Risk and Finance Committee previously. Which will provide an increased liquidity of $200,000 to council. We've noted that that should go through to the general rates reserve. To continue with the ability to maintain at the low rate as possible, we've worked through the personnel savings. As part of our draft annual plan, we had savings of 0.9 million. And we're able to identify a further $0.9 million as a result of our finalisation of the annual plan. And across the board, further cost savings were identified. Initially, there was $1.4 million in the draft annual plan. And then we finalised them with another 1.4 million in the annual plan, with further savings to come in annual plans 27 and 28 of 2.2 million. These will be permanent and ongoing. So as a result of the changes, we've managed to get to a place of 8.92%, recommending that council further increase rates to cope with these changes of $1.5 million. We do note that this is under the long-term plan of 10.13%. We do not believe that any of those met the significance and engagement policy requirements to re-engage with the community. And open to any questions.
Thank you, Adele. Thank you for that comprehensive explanation of where things have moved since the draft annual plan. But I'd now like to open it to questions, and I see Councillor Joyce.
What a surprise. And I'd add to your thanks. I mean, I really appreciate this. Is lovely and clear, and very important for our public to see how things are happening. I noticed, obviously, the savings on personnel, and item 15 on page 56 talks about that. Do we have a number? What is the reduction on FTEs?
Through the chair, so the total number is about 13. So there was some resources required for our ERP, and then we've got other ones that have been removed, but the overall change was 13.
Yeah, I understand. So the net change, yeah. And that'll come out, no doubt, in the annual report as well, for people as well. I guess I was trying to think of how not to dive into too much detail, I promise. But I guess from a public's point of view, yeah, there are a number of mistakes that have been made over time. And I don't want to get into the people side of it, but yeah, and we've brought forward the implementation of the ERP. I know that's part of the solution, right? But can we explain to the public why we're getting so many errors, and what is the systemic issue behind some of these. I mean, I realize there's always a few changes between draft and final, but we just seem to be getting quite a bit of change. And perhaps for the sake of the public, we could explain a little bit about why this is becoming such an issue for us.
Through the Mayor. So we're obviously dealing with a very complex taxation, for the local government sector here, with 160 targeted rates, as well as general rates. That does provide some challenges in terms of ensuring that everything is correct. When we're flowing through, we've got a system called Ozone, which is our baseline ERP system. So that has been in play now for over 20 years. So we have acknowledged that we need to upgrade that. And we're also working with an IBIS system, which requires us to deal with the complexity of our rating system, and having that visibility across the complexity and how it flows through. So we have acknowledged that we have lost some knowledge over time, and have been working very hard to ensure that we've got the capability in-house to be able to do that. We did go through a process of undertaking reviews after our draft, and building the capability across the team. And we have got some experts that were brought in-house just to round everything else now to give you confidence moving forward. But we feel that we're in a good place.
Thank you. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour.
Yes, just one thing in regard to water charging. We talked in an earlier workshop, and I think in the annual plan meeting, about the possibility of maintaining the existing level of charging for the fixed charge for water connections, rather than just increasing the volumetric charge and reducing the water charge to balance that. I've seen no mention of that here. Is there any explanation around the practicalities of whether that's possible or not? And in the back of my mind, of course, is the criticism we got from the local Waters Done Well report about under-recovering for water and ensuring that we are charging sufficient in that area going forward. So is it not practical at this stage to change, is essentially my question?
I can answer that. So through the Mayor, so we have reviewed our volumetric consumption that's been consumed by the community, and we did look at the options, obviously, between increasing our volumetric charge or our fixed charge. Through the process of the annual plan development, we have moved our volumetric charge from $1.42 to $1.75, as per the discussion that we had with council, and agreed to that. We've also looked at our total volumes and ensured that the volumes and the volumetric charges with those numbers will marry up. And we've got a better idea now that we've had a few years of using volumetric water to identify what our actual usage is. At the time that when it was put together in the last long-term plan, we were seeing quite an increase over time as our communities grew, that we would use more water, but we haven't been seeing that through the actual. So we believe that we've got the balance about right now between the volumetric charge and our fixed charge, and the right assumption on the usage. However, given that we have increased the volumetric charge, we're still at a little bit of risk, as we know.
Councillor Wickers.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for bringing this report into the public. It's much appreciated, and the detail that's gone into that we can clearly articulate some of the issues that we've been dealing with. Just some questions with regard to the reserve. So acknowledging that we are waiting for a detailed report in regard to the reserves and account balances, I'll just deal with information that's in this one. So just checking, so the rebuilding of the general rate reserve of 700K was because it was reduced, and so it needed to be rebuilt, and that's what I understand that to be.
Through the chair, so we've got the data here from what the general rate reserve has been over the number of years, and a lot of councils around the country, because of the decline in the revenue that we have received from regulatory, have had to use some of their reserve funding. The balance at the end of June last year was $738,000. We think that the right number is probably closer to $2 million, is where we need to be, just to make sure that we can deal with any unknowns in any year, which includes those fluctuations, which do come from time to time. And we've got the resilience to be able to do that without going back to a rate situation and or a loss situation. So the general rate reserve is used for all of our general rates activities, and any overs and unders from each and every year will flow through that particular account and through that reserve. So yeah, we've got all the other prior year figures, but we believe it's prudent now to rebuild that to ensure that we can deal with any shocks effectively.
So just clarifying, did I hear that it was sort of mainly used to cover that shortfall in regulatory? Is that correct?
That is the key reason.
Yeah.
It's right.
Okay, and then we've got the rebuilding of the waste levy of 1.1. So that's indicated that it went into the general rate reserve, and then what happened to it after that?
Through the Mayor, so the general rate reserve is, as I mentioned before, the overs and unders of all general rate activities. And so when we utilised what we thought was prudent for the end of last year for the regulatory and other costs, we maintained it at 738,000, with the difference being the 4.2 million, which is a loan that's been repaid over 3 years.
Okay, so just clarifying that the 1.1 was included in the general rate reserve, and
through the chair, yes, that's my understanding.
And so were there any other reserves that were sort of cleared into the general rate reserve, like these two that we just discussed?
No.
So then I'm trying to understand the bigger picture here. So we had a 4.2 million from the previous year that has been indicated as mostly from the regulatory services. And then we just sort of indicated there was sort of another 1.8 in what we just discussed here. So that sort of puts the figure at roughly around 6 million. Is that a fair representation of sort of that overall deficit that happened through the decline in the increase in cost that we've been discussing?
I would need to do the reconciliation, but the waste levy that was from many, many years prior, where that had gone through. So it wasn't just a 1 year matter.
Oh, thanks for that. Right, appreciate the answers to that. So I just want to sort of understand a little bit of the timing. So in the report, these corrections were identified that happened since the draft annual plan in February. And then just referring back to the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee in middle of March, we were sort of assured that there was nothing that was known or suspected that would affect our financial position. So did this information come to light after that, after the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee meeting?
So excuse me, the AF, when we've discussed the numbers, we would have been looking at the actuals for the 24-25 year and looking at what that landing position would have been for that year. But all the changes in front of you happened between the draft being issued and as we've gone through that review process for the annual plan.
Yep. After
the draft.
Okay, so we just had an email this morning that indicated that the inflation and amounts were known back in December. So none of these other issues were identified at that time?
The answer is no. So when they did the reviews, you'll see some of them as just the number of years over which we took out loans, the review of the details around the repayments, the double up of salaries as they went through the final review process, and rebuilding of reserves has been a recommendation by the interim CE. And health insurance, we've only just recently been made aware that the costs are increasing higher than what we forecast.
Okay, so the inflation and stuff was known in December, but all the rest sort of happened after that March.
Yeah. Sorry, through the chair. That's correct. We apply, so each and every year as part of our initial changes to the upcoming annual plan, we update for the most up-to-date information. So the long-term plan is effectively an indicative budget with indicative figures at that point in time. It is a 10-year view, which we look to obviously update every 3 years. The annual plan process gives us the most up-to-date information, and particularly with inflation interest moving quite significantly in the last 5 years. So when we prepare the draft annual plan, we take all the changes in our opening balances as close to what we're forecasting they're going to be. We apply the latest bill information, which is shared across all the councils around the country, and we apply those assumptions. We also had our independent Stuart Henderson look over our assumptions as well, what we were doing, particularly in the interest space. So they were all applied at our initial changes to our annual plan as our first start of our updates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wickers. Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. My question is just looking to be sure that we're comfy where we're at, and that's with the bad debt situation. Obviously, the bad debt hasn't been too bad, and hence you felt you could cut that back. So looking forward, I guess I'm concerned still that whilst we've gone under our projected rate increase as far as the LTP is concerned, it's still noticeable, and I'm worried about people that will drop into that band that will struggle. How are we? But the only way you can answer at present with anything is to do with currently. So how are we tracking with bad debt at this moment? Are we still comfortably well within that area, and is it being managed? Are we managing it well?
So in our accounts to April, we were 900,000 better off in bad debts than budget, and that's allowed us to make this assumption that for the year will be 600. We obviously have got 2 further months, including that year-end process to go through. We've added an additional resource through this funding as well to help us keep a tighter control in that space.
Councillor Maybench.
With a tight loan on item 2, I'm really concerned for local government because we're the last man standing. We have a timeline of about 10 years for someone to put a claim in, and our building inspectors are there so vulnerable. But there needs to be some negotiations with government, because if they're going to allow private sector building approvals, they should have the same responsibilities that we do, or else we should be freed up, because it's just wrong that people can wait for so long and then pop in a claim and we have to fund it somehow. And if you've got...
Councillor Maybench, it's a great point. I think we all agree, but it's not really relevant to this.
Oh, yes, it is, because we've got a cost.
No, you're talking a policy issue around weather-tight claims and so on. This is about our annual plan and the provisions for that. So it's a great point, but I don't think it's relevant.
I'm looking at the amount and I'm saying work needs to be done.
Yes. I think we all agree with that and share the same sentiment. Thank you. I don't see any more. Another question. Okay, Councillor Maybench.
We used to have a LAP fund, which was Local Authority Protection Program for Disaster Relief, and everybody walked away from that. Have we got enough in our reserves to cope with a massive problem that could actually hit us? How much should we expect to see in that reserve?
There's probably a difference, Councillor, between what you expect and what we have. So it was noted as part of the sale of the electricity company in the 80s, 90s, that fund was put aside for contingency for a disaster. So there's about $9.8 million that we're currently holding in reserve for that purpose.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any further questions looking around the room. Do you have to move, Councillor Joyce? Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Granger. Any further debate? Councillor Joyce. Yeah.
So it's an interesting report to put out in an election year, isn't it? Normally politicians are accused of sweeping things under the carpet in an election year, and after the election, the traditional belief out in the public is that all the problems come out. We've actually done a really good job, and I'd like to congratulate both the interim CEO and the staff on digging in and finding the problems and putting them out into light. You know, it's always tempting for anybody to sort of bury their problems, and we haven't done that. We've actually brought them out and shown the world. Is it pleasant reading? No. There are some structural issues there. We've talked a little bit about IBIS and Ozone, the two seemingly incompatible financial programs that we have. And we certainly have some manual workarounds underway to make those two try to work together. And that's, to be honest, is part of the problem, because you know, you've got an incredibly complicated system. It's a $140 million a year business, and manual workarounds are not where it should be. But having said that, this council needs to be congratulated because it stopped putting off replacing the financial software and actually has bitten the bullet and getting on and doing it. Perhaps we should look to previous terms and ask why, when those problems have been long-standing, that wasn't done, but we are where we are. And this council has actually moving ahead with replacing it. I'm hopeful that, you know, the years 2 and 3, which has been pointed out, we don't normally see at this time, will actually be better than this. The economic recovery is starting to get underway. And as we know, that's really taxed our regulatory services department, which has the most volatile revenue of any part of our organisation. We get this new financial software in place. Yeah, hopefully there's a, you know, the figures tracking so far this year have actually been quite positive. So if we get a good surplus, maybe we won't need to put so many provisions around upside for like general rate reserve next year, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think getting ahead of ourselves has been part of the problem in the past. So yeah, I'm just pleased this report's come out to the public. As Councillor Wick has said, it's good to get it out there, good to explain to people the issues. And the fact that we're willing to do this, you know, so many months out from an election, I think shows that we are actually trying hard to fix problems around this table. And it's not one person. Although the interim CEO has been very much the heart of this. If there's only one person to point to for this, thanks for this, it's her. But we've all played a role in trying to sort out what is a little bit of a mess. And that's why I'm pleased to move this sort out report.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Wickers.
Yep, I would just endorse everything that Rodney said. Really appreciate Miriam and the work and bringing this to there. I'd like to move a couple of recommendations for the team to consider. So I'll state those now. So the first one is that the council writes to the Auditor General requesting assistance in reviewing our internal auditing program. And the second one, that the council engages forensic accountants with local government experience to review the relevant council finances. So I'm just putting that out there to see if the team want to go down that track.
What was the second one?
So this was the suggestion by the CE that the council engages a forensic accountant.
It wasn't a suggestion by the CE, just to be clear on that.
Okay. So that the council engages forensic accountants with local government experience to review the relevant council finances.
I think with that is a decision that is, we haven't got the information in front of us to make that decision now. It's something we can potentially consider next council meeting. But I think in terms of, you know, there's a cost component and things like that. So I think it would be unwise to try and vote on that now. I just don't think we've got the information in front of us to consider that.
I'm just putting it to the team. So
can I suggest a way forward between the two, that the chief executive investigate those two matters and bring them back to a future council meeting before the election, hopefully. I don't know, I'd like to hear from the CEO on those points, but yeah, it has a little bit sprung on us, and I'm not saying I'm necessarily against them or for them, but they are worth having a look at. And rather than trying to vote them through today when we have limited information about both the cost implications and other things, it would be good to get a report if the CE is willing, and perhaps move that as an amendment saying that the CE investigate these things and bring back to council. Would that be a good idea?
Okay, I'm going to suggest that the CE comments if she'd be willing to, and perhaps think about the best way to handle this.
In terms of the forensic accountants, I think council would need to determine what the purpose of the investigation will be, because you'd have to focus it on something particular. You couldn't go through everything. It would be expensive. You'd have to determine why you're doing it. I mean, because you're going to be spending quite a bit of money and time. That's not saying a no. All I'm saying is there needs to be a purpose for that, and you need to be agreed about what you're trying to find or what you have issues with. So I think that would require quite a bit of discussion. I wouldn't take that on lightly. As I've said to you, I think that would be quite a big task, and forensic accountants usually go over history. So from what I'm hearing, it would be going over historical results. And you'd have to determine how narrow that piece of work would be. So that would be my comments on that one. It's not common, to be honest. The other one in terms of internal audit program, is that what you were talking about, Andy?
Yep.
Yeah. So I have had a talk to Andy about, we do have an internal audit program, and we test specific controls and specific parts as part of a 3-year program, which is what all councils do. I think you could revisit that as part of what you want to scope in an internal audit. And you could also look at what the Auditor General's recommendations are on what a good internal audit program should be, because they have that on their website in the OAG. So there's a lot of good information there about what we should do. I think from past experience, there's a large range of things that internal audit could look at, which is independent of us and independent of external audit. It's a matter of what you want to focus on, and you don't want to keep repeating things. So you can never cover everything in a 3-year program. So I think it's quite likely that we should, at the Audit and Risk Committee, we should just revisit the audit program going forward and look at what the whole range of things that you want to consider and what's recommended. So I think Adele and the team could do a little bit of work on that, and I think that would be a good idea. Yeah. So that's my feedback on those 2 points.
So Councillor Wickers, perhaps to find a way through this, we could resolve to revisit, workshop the audit program and
the internal
audit program.
Yeah.
And then also to consider engaging a forensic accountant and the issues around that. And I don't know, it would be a workshop, ARF workshop, or maybe convene an ARF meeting.
A workshop would be a good idea, because I think if you wanted to go down that path, you need to be able to ask questions and look at what is your purpose and scope. And I think that's, you've all got to agree on that, because you don't want to waste money in the areas that you don't all agree on.
So yeah. Bring a paper to an audit, risk and finance workshop, which can be convened.
My comment on that would be, it's not really done very often. Usually it's done when there's a serious fraud or someone else is called in. So it's not usual to do that sort of work, and it's very complex, and it would take quite a bit of time. It would definitely take more time than the election period. So I just raised that issue with you.
Well, I think a workshop would be an appropriate place to consider the more complex implications and costs and so on. So if we add that to the list of, to the recommendation to receive that report, have you got those two, Robin?
Yep, roughly.
Roughly. So revisit the internal audit program and bring a paper to an audit risk and finance workshop around.
Requesting to convene an audit risk and finance workshop to consider the internal audit program and any possible use of forensic accountants.
Happy to take that into my move.
Sorry?
Happy to take that into my motion.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that, Councillor Wickers?
Murray had a word.
Oh, sorry, it was, okay.
We'll bring it into the motion, yeah?
Yes, can I speak?
Yes.
with our internal audit system, we have looked at specific areas that council could be at risk, doing our GST wrong, doing infringement of tax wrong, making sure the PAE is all correctly done and what have you. And I think that is valuable and a good use of the internal audit systems and to make sure that everything is done right. But I think that with the best will in the world, no matter how good your internal audit system is, mistakes can creep through and they're not necessarily going to find everything. And I don't want to see us spending a whole heap of money chasing something that we may never find or never fix. So I'm happy to support it as it is. I don't know how, again, how one would define the forensic accounting job to ensure that you found whatever it was you're looking for. Because if you know it's there, you'll find it. If you don't know it's there, you probably won't find it. It's sort of a bit of a chasing your tail, circular argument. So I'm happy to support it as it is in that general sense, but I just want to raise a flag of just being wary about what we're actually trying to achieve.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Granger. Councillor Coxhead.
Fundamentally, I don't disagree with Andy, but my thoughts initially as well, clarified also by Miriam, were the fact that the scope needed to be defined quite tightly, and also the costs had to be assessed, and I'm quite comfortable with the idea of doing it as issues and options and doing it in a workshop. I think probably one of the key things I've always learnt through being in an audited environment myself, always internal audited environment, the checks and the balances are the key things, and the regularity of those checks and balances as well. So I think audit even of process is probably more important than perhaps some of looking at some of the historical stuff would be my view.
Councillor Mowbridge.
I have said for some time how lucky we are to have had Miriam's experience brought in to actually help us get to grips with where we are at our annual plan and the costs that we're confronting. Always fascinates me, you know, we'll go to an election in October and the government will go in a year's time, and people will want to know what the government is going to give them in their election campaign, whereas we have the people say, we want to know how little you will take from us. And so we have a completely opposite problem to central government politicians who can promise the earth and not necessarily deliver. In reading the annual report and looking at the amount of money, the average income for the people in our wards, it's not a wealthy area, and knowing that anything we can do to improve our system is really important. And so I support the workshop. I don't agree with spending much money because I think that just then compounds the problem that we've got. But when I listen to Adele talking about the 100 or so targeted rates that they've got to deal with, I think it's that, and it's complicated and complex. And if you've got a significant changeover in staff, it takes time for them to catch up. But I'm just delighted that we've got two who've got an historical view of how things were and how we go forward. So I think the policy changes that need to be negotiated with central government on weather tightness is a good example of more work that we've got to do. So I'm happy to support the recommendations plus the amendments.
Councillor Daly.
Yeah, I guess I'm happy for it to come back to a workshop for consideration. However, like Margaret alluded to, we've got those two fine gentlemen over there. Not sure if their CV includes forensic accountant or not, but I understand Miriam brought them in for pretty much that purpose. And I know it's past question time, but just wondering what Miriam's consideration of that fact and what she expected them to achieve when they came in here, and would there be any added benefit by paying another set of forensic accountants to maybe revisit what's already been, what we already know, maybe from their investigations.
The gentleman might like to comment themselves. They are very experienced, so I couldn't think of any better skilled people to do the work that we're doing. In terms of forensic accountants, I think they're a special breed. They focus on particular things. And my experience, you would struggle to find anyone with local government experience who understands how local government works. So you would be more likely to get a forensic accountant that's focused on just the numbers in a general ledger and a standard financial accounting system. The issues that you have in council where the errors happen is to do with the difficulties between systems. We have 35 different businesses in our organisation and different software talking to different ones, IBIS versus Ozone versus needing a new ERP. That to me is a better spend of funds in making sure that we get better technology. But I do think that I'm not aware of anyone else other than the two gentlemen who do this sort of stuff on a regular basis. Yeah.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Joyce and, oh, sorry, did I, oh, please do.
I appreciate the conversation that happened. I raised those things because we're in an environment in a decline in governmental institutions, and people see stuff happening and it looks murky, and I was at the end of this meeting, I'm going to have to be able to justify my role in the last 3 years that this happened while I was on this council. I've got a particular friend who holds me accountable, and he doesn't allow political answers. And so I needed to wash my hands and clear my conscience that I'm not a financial person, so that's why I raised it to the team. We've got a good brains trust here, so I appreciate your wisdom and appreciate Miriam as well. Yeah, so that's my why I raised those things, and the questions. Just that, say I'm not a financial person, but at the end of this, I need to be able to look my friend in the eye and not give him a political answer. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wickers. I think Councillor Joyce would like his right to reply.
So obviously this debate has moved in a welcome direction since I started. So I just wanted to summarise a couple of things. I think the main thing I wanted to talk about was Tracy's comment. And I think it's really important. And I think whoever's sitting around this table after the election, traditionally the delegations all come in, the first meetings, and boom, it's gone. For those of us that were new, it was all gone before we even had a chance to really understand them. And I think part of the issue is around that. And that comes back to, as Tracy said, or Councillor Cox had said, I should use her proper title, to the auditing process. Yes, you need delegations. In the middle of an emergency, sort of emergency, the CEO has to be able to hire helicopters or whatever and do things. But those delegations need to be a little bit tighter in terms of both when they can be used and how they are reported after the fact, because I think that's part of the process. Auditing process is about saying, okay, and I'm using the CEO as an example. I'm not talking about any particular spending or anything. If you have a delegation and that allows you to go outside what would normally be the case, then it should be reported back in some shape or form to the Audit and Risk Committee, for example. And whereas we don't seem to have those systems in place fully, because there's some quite big numbers in those delegations, and they're there. And I said, so why is it so big? And they said, well, in an emergency, you need to move fast. Absolutely true, but they should only be used in an emergency, some of those big delegations. So I think, looking forward is what's key here. Learning lessons and looking forward for the next council is what we need to focus on, not just saying what Councillor Wickers is saying about also looking at the past, but I think Councillor Cox had raised a very, very good point that we should all be cognizant of.
Thank you. So with that, it's been moved by councillor Joyce, seconded by councillor Granger. There's three recommendations there to receive the report, and then sorry, it's just two, isn't it? And then the other one, which is sort of in two parts, which is to convene the audit risk and finance workshop to revisit internal audit programs and consider what's the exact wording?
Any possible use of forensic.
Any possible use of forensic accountants. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So with that, we'll break for morning tea and come back at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Sorry. Morning to you. We'll restart the council meeting. So we're on page 58 and our next item is to recommend the recommendation to council for the adoption of the annual plan 25-26, financial contributions schedule 25-26, and the schedule of fees and charges 25-26. So Rebecca, I think, or Rachel are here to present this one.
Thank you, Mayor James. And we're not intending to traverse this report in any great detail. I take it that you've all had the opportunity to read it. This is the final step in the process before you strike the rates. So we're in your hands in terms of any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No. In which case, I think it'd be appropriate to ask maybe Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour, as Chair of the Annual Plan Long-Term Plan Committee, to move the report. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Thwaites, open, and so I'll open up for debate. Would you like to speak?
A couple of brief comments. I do think this is appropriate to the position that we find ourselves in at this time. And so on that basis, I support it. It is very disappointing, though, to not be able to deliver on the expectations that were put out there in terms of our draft annual plan a few months ago. And but as I said at the beginning, it's appropriate to what we've discovered and uncovered since. And so I think it's very sensible to move forward with this and not perpetuate issues that were coming to light. I do also want to comment that while the 8.92% is presented as our average rate increase, there is more so than in other years considerable variance around that figure. And so I think we need to be aware of there will be some angst in some parts of the community and some rejoicing in other parts of the community. And so I think we need to be prepared for those comments from people as we run into them. But with that, I'm happy to support this proposal.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour. Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Murray-Baines.
I support the annual plan recommendations, but I am concerned, as I was reading your report, for example, that the people in the 39,000 is the income, or 32,000 is the average income in one of our wards, 41,900 in another, and 39,100 in the other ward. So we do not have a high income community that we represent. And I look at the future for local government and our long-term plan, and we cannot leave the long-term plan projections as to where they are. I regret that we are not close to the inflation level for this annual plan, but we all know why that was. And the sorting out that has been done was not before time. I want to say we've got to start listening to our communities. And one of the things that fellow councillors do not do well is listen to their community. And so I take the representation review, which our staff spent months and months on, and we took no notice of them. And on a divided decision, we made a different decision. And it was the commission that actually sorted us out. On another issue, I look back and think, if only we listened to what the community was saying. I
think it's a little bit unfair to be saying we don't listen and just a broad brush, and we make our decisions democratically.
If you want me to go on, sir, I'm happy to do so, but it would be unhelpful. I just make the point. Listening to the community is fundamental to everything we do around this table. And because they often have the answers, And I've always believed you don't have to have the answer. That's one of the great things of working in a committee. You don't have to have the answer, but you need to support the person who does. And so that's what we have done here. And so I look forward to, and I want to say, sir, one of the things that your annual plan highlighted was our volunteers. And I look at our hall committees and the people who diligently look after those hall committees, and we could not do as much as we do without the volunteers within our district. And we're very grateful that they are committed, and we have the support of our staff to encourage them as well. So I reluctantly say the annual plan, it's good that we're getting it behind us and we can look forward to this next year. And I think the recommendations that came from the last committee, item will help to guide us, but we need to actually do some policy studies to actually make sure that we're not walked over as local government again. And that happens far too often. Might I also say that one of the things, I'll say that till later, sir. So that's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Murray Benj. Councillor Wickers next.
Yep, I'll be supporting this now that we've cleared the air in regard to the issues in the room. Appreciate the work that has been done in a very relatively short period of time and putting a plan together that is viable. And so I'll be supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wickers. Councillor Joyce and then Councillor Coxhead.
This annual plan needs to be implemented. We need rubbish to be collected next week. We need parks to be mowing. We need work to be done on the roads, and we need we need to keep going. Can we be particularly proud of this? No, this is a bit of a cleanup, and I again appreciate the cleanup efforts that lots of people have made to try and make this work as we've sorting out issues. I think the next council has a lot of work to do. And partly that will be driven from outside. Local water's done well, means we must seal off that big chunk of council. And while no final decision has been made, it looks like it's going to go to a multi-CCO. But even frankly, if it was ended up staying in-house, it's still going to be sealed off in a corner. So this council is going to look very different in a couple of years' time. It's going to be smaller, and the challenge will be to make it a lot more focused and work out what business is actually in. So we've got a lot of big questions beyond waters to look at. I would draw attention to page 123 of the agenda, support services, which is basically our head office costs, and they continue to rise. They're lower than long-term plan if you look at total operating funding, but they're still going up. So one thing I've noticed looking back historically over this council's history is that we had some big challenges long before I was anywhere near the place, around our waters infrastructure. We came out of a county, not a lot had been done. A lot of money had to be spent. And up until about 5 or 6 years ago, we were through that and we were paying down debt. And then we turned that around and we started spending big time, and debt started to go up big time. And I think we do need to have a rethink about what this council's for. Now, it's well beyond the scope of today's decision, but I just want to highlight that. Business as usual cannot continue for this council. It's not affordable. It's not affordable for our ratepayers, as Margaret has pointed out, Councillor Murray Benj has pointed out. And we need to work out a new model for this council going forward. Now, if we can't do that, then I'm concerned for the future of our ratepayers and the bills they pay. It's not enough to just keep pace with other councils. Just because everybody else has put their rates up 10%, we can't congratulate ourselves putting it up 8.9. It's not where we need to be. Not least because it's only a couple of years ago that we had the highest rates in the country until 1 or 2 other councils went mad and spent even more. So we're at the high end of our rates, particularly for residents. And we need to think hard about where we want to be. And that is going to be a job for the next council. So we get this out the door. You're supposed to have a low rates increase in your election year, because that's kind of a New Zealand tradition, and I'm sure it's no different in other parts of the world. But we haven't really got a low one this year. We're cleaning up a bit of a mess and we have to get on and do it. But voting against it would be like saying, well, I don't want your rubbish collected next week. I don't want your roads worked on. I don't want your parks mown. So that's not an option either. So swallow it and let's move on.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Coxhead.
I too will be supporting adoption of the annual plan today. It has taken a lot of hard work from both staff and councillors to get signing off on this annual plan. I think the plan has been particularly challenging, and council is an enormous beast and serves a lot of purposes in the community, and it's highly scrutable. So it's always more difficult probably working in the public eye and accountable, very much accountable to the public, as it should be. The people around this table have all taken the time and put in the effort to ensure we are delivering an accurate plan, addressing any issues and errors that may have occurred and disclosed. The more eyes scrutinising, the better. And in particular, I'd like to mention Councillor Wickers and Councillor Joyce, who have excelled in their investigation and questioning. I must also thank the people out in our community boards who take a real interest in this and also ask a lot of questions and things that we might not have thought of. So I find that incredibly valuable. It is also somewhat bittersweet that we are able to deliver the plan with a rate increase of 8.92% as opposed to the LTP rate of 10.13. However, not as good as we would have liked for reasons already explained. As a council, we must remain focused on the continuing rising costs and the impact of the rates we charge. People are struggling and we all know this. This decision may or may not be taken out of the hands of councils anyway by central government with rate capping. Whilst very good in theory, it may not be the silver bullet people think it is. Ratepayers will have to decide what they are prepared to go without, affecting levels of service, etc. And as costs will continue to rise, we may have to go without many things, but hopefully not at the rate that they have currently been increasing. We should see hopefully some levelling out of costs. There is always a trade-off, but as the Prime Minister says, we must do the basics well, and this includes budgeting well and managing costs. The council's next big decision is the local waters done well. With the government's drive towards water CCOs locally, it will be a time for councils to refocus on the core role of local government and what the future actually looks like in this space. In closing, I'd like to thank all the people around this table who have worked so hard and the staff involved, and thank you very much to the CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Coxhead, for those kind words. Councillor Ray, next.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to pretend to sugarcoat the increases. They are very sustainable for some people, but they are also unsustainable for quite a lot of other people. I do love, though, the fact that I personally have now got to a point where I do feel comfortable. I do have a lot of trust in the work that staff have done. The due diligence that they've done has been really, really good to see. And thank you very much to Miriam for that. Also the work of others here too. I couldn't fault that because I don't come from a business background. I don't come from high level accountants, stuff like that. I look at those numbers and, oh, wow. But hey, I feel very confident today to be able to, say yes to giving the staff the direction that they need to deliver the work program as of the 1st of July. I don't see much point in saying no to adopting the plan today. I'll just flag though that I do wish that there was, a slightly lower increase, but hey, it's still better than that 10, and it's in line with other councils around the place. Everybody knows the costs of everything pretty much have gone through the roof. So yeah, just really, really want to thank staff, elected members, and look forward to watching how the plan is delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Thwaites.
Thank you, Your Worship. No surprise for me, as I seconded these recommendations, that I will be supporting it today. Although 8.92% will be the figure in a possible newspaper release tomorrow, that just tells part of the story. And it does highlight the ongoing issue between urban areas with water connections and rural areas. I live in an area that is going to face a 12 to 13% increase. So I sort of take 8.9 with a bit of a ho-hum. It does highlight particularly the water space for the last 5 years, I would call it. Since it kicked off under the Three Waters regime, it has become a massive political football that has bounced around, and somehow we've got caught up in our own performance alone. This year, we are dropping our stormwater charges by 33%, and that's the exact reason why I voted against last year's budget for this current year for the first time ever I voted against it, and now we're rectifying it this year. 33% drop. That shows how far out of kilter we were. We're dropping our water charges to households by 7.4%. Great, rates go down. But on the other hand, guess what? We get an envelope another couple of times a year where our wastewater, our water, volumetric water charges are actually going up 18.8%. We could be as sneaky as Tauranga and Hauraki and Waipa and drop water off our rates demand completely like they have and just send it out in those separate invoices. And then we'd actually be going out with a 2.92% increase, because 6% would just vanish from our rate setting like those councils have done. That's all going to be addressed in the next couple of years as water entities emerge. It's unfortunate that we have to allow that $1.5 million for the next 3 years to rectify some of the issues that was highlighted by my colleague beside me here. So that's going to just take that gloss off as we really charge to contain within inflation, having to account for past errors. But like I said, we could always drop water off our rates demand next year, and then we'd be swimming in it, wouldn't we, Andy? But anyway, rates aren't fair, universal charge, and that with this ongoing talk of amalgamation going on, there is still going to be that ongoing friction between urban centres and the rural catchment under the current Rating Act and the rating laws. You go to rural Auckland and the former Rodney and former Franklin councils, and that they don't see amalgamation as the greatest answer. So 8.92, I can live with that. And I think we can do a whole lot better. And hopefully the council going forward will address those water issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thwaites. Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. Well, basically, I guess in the next item in our agenda, the music will really stop. That's where it comes to the final bit with that. But business must go on. Our business is a noticeable business. It has an effect on everybody basically in our district, and it's just got to continue. That's been touched on by virtually, I think, everybody so far that's spoken today. There's been a lot of putting right. And I, for one, am so pleased to be front-footing and being as transparent as I believe we are with this. So it is really good to see that we are going out there. And as has been mentioned, it's an election year, and we're going out and we're not going out with a lolly scramble or something like that, or being la-di-da nice. We're doing what we have to do. And that's part of the thing I have to say here. We are the governors. We set what the priorities are or what work needs to be done. We make sure that it is funded, that the resources are there for the CE and her staff or his staff, whoever that is, to get on and produce what we need to know. And then we, I guess, take that medicine and sort it out and do the best we can from there. So to me, I think one of the things we have is, and you hear it a fair bit these days, there's a duopoly with our food industry here in New Zealand, or the supermarkets. We are a monopoly. Our customers, our stakeholders, whatever you like to refer to them as, have no choice. They have to pay the bill. We create or set that bill, and we have done it today, or are about to do it today, should I say. So they have no choice. They can't go and buy the PAMS version, or they can't go and buy the house brand. Here's your bill, mate, pay it. And I think we've got to consider that the whole time and really focus on that in the future. I really feel that basically, as a council, we have started to front up a lot more to it in this last period. So I just really feel I'm certainly not a socialist. I'm very much a capitalist, but I have a social conscience. And that social conscience tells me that people are still hurting, and how we spend, how we go into building up our levels of debt. There are good reasons to do it, but we have to be so careful about what we do, the guidance and the instruction that we give to our staff as to where we go, and then how we assess what they give us back. And we need to ask those questions. So, Sir, central government, since the change of government, has gone out and said, councils, behave yourselves. Councils, stop having your vanity projects. Councils, look at your basic work. We've got to get a large part of that back into order, and I believe we're starting to move that way with how we've brought ourselves back into a area of level playing, I guess. At the same time, sir, I basically believe that we've been given good advice. We've had a wonderful presentation of how things have been put together, the problems we've had. We've got a CE that has really taken on board pretty well a hospital pass, frankly, and has done a darn good job of getting us somewhere back on track. And, well, I believe on track. And we're told we're in a good space. And my confidence is in that saying that we are in a good space. It is how we manage that space going forward, which will be important. Collective responsibility is what it's about. And as we go through the rest of this today, sir, that's where I take my part in this council's role in what it's done. And I look forward to us moving on and seeing an end to this process and starting, I guess, anew. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Sol. Councillor Daly.
Yeah, thank you, James. I normally wing it a bit with these speeches, but I thought today's quite an important one, and I would prepare something a bit more professional. So I'm speaking in support of the recommendations. With the election looming large, this may be the last annual plan process I have a decision-making role in. So I'd like to take a moment to reflect on what we've been through to reach this point. Even before I became a councillor, I, like many others, made submissions to council about the annual plan and long-term plan proposals. And one of my main considerations was, what effect is this going to have on our rates bill? I delved into my hard drive and found my 2015 LTP submission written on behalf of Te Puke Community Board from 10 years ago. Much like submissions we've seen from Western Ward and Omukarua Ratepayers Associations recently, I prepared the spreadsheet which shows the compounding effect of the proposed rate rises over the 10 years to 2025. And at the time, I did a verbal submission to the councillors in the Settlers Lounge at Te Puke Memorial Hall and urged them to stick to these forecasts of an average of 3.24% and try not to push it out to that 5% mark. And anyway, I've repopulated my 10-year-old spreadsheet with actuals, and while we thought rates would have risen about $1,000 10 years ago, the actual increase is nearly twice that. We now know the reality of the last few years has been starkly different to what was envisaged in 2015. And by comparison to those modest predictions of yesteryear with an average rates rise of 324, so that the 5.91 is a result of very steep increases over these last few years. So, and could even be perhaps described as rampant rates rises. And of course, that's very difficult for us as elected members to have to deal with the members of the public who see this. So rational reasons are always put forth to justify the increases, and generally most other councils in the country were facing similar pressures to us. So it was usually a nationwide narrative, often fueled by the need to comply with the new unfunded by them government policy statements or regulatory requirements. So it falls back on the long-suffering ratepayer to pick up the tab. Every week of late, we're hearing comments from government ministers and media commentators about too many councils, amalgamation, local government spending like drunken sailors or sidetracked by nice-to-haves and neglecting essential council business like infrastructure, reserves, roads, rubbish and waters. The Prime Minister was very pointed in his expectations when he addressed last year's local government conference. While it may be that some councils are not doing themselves any favours in this regard, I like to think we have generally been very mindful of the tensions between being prudent, responding to community requests and expectations, and then having to accommodate the seemingly never-ending demands government legislation imposes on us. Submissions to our recent representation review reminded us of the importance of not losing the local voice, and bigger is not always better. So while the government might think they know better, be careful what you wish for. The rates rise we're passing here today of 8.92% is less than the LTP forecast of 10.13%. And even though we thought we may have been able to do better, the earlier discussion we had today does highlight the complexities of running a, correct me if I'm wrong, $125 million business activity. And to quote the wise Forrest Gump, it happens. To be clear, elected members are generally not forensic accountants. So we do rely on the staff employed by our CEO, and we have been told that it is not uncommon for unexpected issues and oversights in most councils that are generally addressed through each year's annual plan process. And I know our staff are not setting out to deliver anything other than their best. And so I'm very confident that we're now back on track and move forward with the big issues facing us, such as local water's done well, more government intervention, more demands from our ratepayers, whether it be for restraint or more support to build better communities. It's a highly charged dilemma that will no doubt always exist unless some magical utopia is discovered to fix everything. So not happy with this level of metronomic rates rises, and like Rodney says, we do need to be more diligent and find more innovative ways to fund the community building activities and social infrastructure, as well as keeping the less glamorous but absolutely necessary core services delivered efficiently and economically. We're starting to put in place initiatives that should help in this regard, e.g. more local procurement, bringing transportation in-house, and perhaps a higher level of scrutiny from elected members, which we are hopeful will lead to a higher regard for council, staff and elected members from the community. So with that, I recommend this annual plan.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. I'll say a few words. I think there's probably not a huge amount extra to add. It's probably gone around the houses a bit, but it's a solid annual plan that helps move our district forward. The rates increase is a little bit higher than we would have liked, but it is still lower than what's in the LTP, and it is lower than most or many or perhaps most local councils that I'm aware of. And last, I'd like to thank staff and elected members to get us to this point. And I would like to also just hand over to Miriam, who wants to say a few words probably on that same matter as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. Really, this is just some thank yous that are well deserved. Particularly want to thank the staff who've been at the pointy end of this process with me over the last few months. I've come in here and probably created a bit of disruption, and that's not been easy. But also, I just think you need to know that the staff are doing their very best and have done a really good job. And I really want to thank those people who have been close to the wire on that. So you know who I'm talking about. Thank you for all of your efforts. They don't go unrecognised. And it's not an easy gig working in local government. It's, you know, when you commit to working as an officer of council, you never know what you're going to get. And usually you only hear from the people who aren't happy with your services. And we deliver a lot of services that a lot of people take for granted. And the only time that we usually hear from them is when they don't work. So thank you, everybody who have helped for that. And also want to thank the councillors for coming together today. And thank you for your kind words. But I also want the staff to take those recommendations as well, because without the staff, I can't operate what I do. I think that's probably all I wanted to say. But yeah, so I think it's really important that we acknowledge the people in the back room that do all of the work. So thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. So with that, there are 8 recommendations which have been moved by Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour and seconded by Councillor Thwaites, and you'd like a right to reply, would you?
Comments. It's all been said really, but we do need to have a plan in place. We do need to have a budget to operate. We need to remember that this is a point in time and circumstances are always changing. And so I do want to just add perhaps a personal mantra of mine. And I really want to acknowledge the comments, particularly from the Chief Executive in terms of staff assistance to get us to this point. But I do want to say that just because a sum is in a budget doesn't mean it always has to be spent. There are many things that we can budget very accurately. We have a whole lot of contracts, we have a whole lot of staff costs and those sort of things that we can predict pretty accurately. But I'd like to encourage staff to work really hard through the year to assess all those other variables and opportunities that come forward to try and bring this next year in under budget. So with that, I'm keen for you all to support this proposal.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So now we move to page 284, which is sort of the part 2 of adopting the annual plan, where we actually set the rates. So this, there are a number of recommendations spread over a number of pages. Just try to count how many there are now, but so the recommendations 1 to 9. Do I have a mover and seconder for these, please? Councillor Murray-Binge, seconder. Councillor Granger. I'm assuming we don't want to hold another round of speeches, but if anyone does, then please say. Councillor Joyce, of course.
I'll keep it brief, unusually for me. I just want to take on board a point that Adele made earlier. 160 types of targeted rates. You know, we need to simplify things, folks. I mean, any computer system is going to struggle with that. And we've got a new one coming that we want to make it work for the ratepayer, for the resident. So, you know, I commend us all, even so Adele can sleep better at night, to simplify the rating system over the next triennium, those that are sitting around this table.
Thank you. So with that, I think I'll put, oh, you want to speak as well, Councillor Murray-Binge?
Good.
Please do.
This is the work that has to be done, and we've got the costs that have to be paid. And so we've got no alternative but to pass this. And I know that we will, in next year, next term, the long-term plan will be challenged. And so I think, though, we're doing the very best we can. And I just repeat again how grateful I am that we had this last few months where we've had Miriam in control and we've had come to grips with what we are actually doing. And we haven't been in that position for some time. And I believe, in my view, that the councillors have got more responsibility and they don't have it. And this last few months has brought it back to the table and to us. We are responsible and we've given that opportunity to be so. So I'm delighted. It would be great if it was a whole lot cheaper, but it's not at this stage. And so I'm supporting recommendations.
Thank you. So those recommendations have been moved by Councillor Murray-Binge, seconded by Councillor Granger. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So now we move on to page 294. which is the Pukahina Development Fund update and next steps. So I welcome Jodie Rickard to introduce this one, please.
Morning, elected members. So yes, as Mayor James just outlined, this is the update on the Pukahina Development Fund and the next steps. So elected members through the long-term plan made the decision to repurpose the Pukahina development rate to go towards existing projects in the Pukahina community and for staff to work with the community to determine what those projects would be. So what I've set out in the report is the list of projects that have been determined. We ran engagement on this from the 2nd of May, I think it was, until the 19th of June. And the way that we did that engagement was in partnership with the Residents and Ratepayers Association. We had an online survey. We sent out a letter to all property owners in the rate area of benefit. We had a community open day, which I think quite a few of the elected members here attended. It was a very well attended event. And we had feedback bins set up at key locations in Pukahina where people could provide their feedback forms. So as I've said out in the report, we received 116 feedback forms. I'd just like to acknowledge Kylie Grayling, who has done the feedback summary that's included in the report. So you can see a really extensive breakdown of all the feedback that was received. And I'd also like to acknowledge Esther Kirk and Stu Mellish from the Residents and Ratepayers Association, who have really put in a huge amount of hours and time into supporting this process. And hopefully you'll be able to see from the recommendations that we're ready to move to the next step, which I think is really exciting and going to be great for that community.
Okay, are there any questions for Jodie or Rachel? Councillor Granger?
Not a question, sir. Just happy to move. I think this is
okay. I was going to move it, but I'll take seconding. I'm sorry. Yeah, question first then.
Yeah, in regards to the panel, it talks of Councillor Daly and myself being appointed to a panel. I couldn't quite read. Maybe I didn't read it carefully enough. Are we the panel, or are there more people involved in that? Because
Through you, Mr. Chair, the panel would include also 2 members from the Residents and Ratepayers Association, so we've got that good balance there.
That makes me much more comfortable.
So the 4 recommendations there, I'd actually like to change recommendation 3 to say approves rather than endorse, since we are, making that approval. But look, it's been a long journey, but I'm pleased that the Pukahina community will get some great outcomes from this. And I thank them for leading the process to determine what they want to spend the money on. And I'm happy to approve their chosen option. So I assume, Councillor Granger, you're happy to accept that slight change of wording?
Indeed, and you've said all I was going to say as well. So.
Great. Okay. With any other comments? Councillor Murray Benj.
I think this highlights the work that our staff have to do for what seems like a reasonably small issue financially, but has consequences throughout that community, and resolving those issues has been really credit to our staff. And I think the recommendations before us are really worthwhile, and I'm sure Councillor Scrimger and Daly will sort it out.
Awesome. Okay, well, any other speakers? Deputy Mayor Scrimger.
Just a very brief comment that I think this is a great example of how council works with communities to understand what they want, and I think it's been a good process.
Thank you. Councillor Daly, did you want to say?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, obviously fully supportive of this initiative. I joined council in 2016, and my first AGM at the Pukahina Beach Ratepayers Association was back then, and I try to attend as many as possible, as well as the monthly meetings, as does John and Laura and Kevin Marsh before that. So it's constant. It's a constant conversation about, projects that will benefit the community, and who's going to pay for them, how we're going to pay for them, when is it going to happen. They've been talking about the cycleway for 10 to 15 years, I guess, and it was progressed with their own resource consent for the cycleway project, led by their chairman back in the day, and it's taken this long to get to the point where they might actually be able to finally build it. And I note that some of the, and I shouldn't refer to them as negative submissions, but concerns about overinvestment. I know we're accused of that when we start building things like nice to haves or vanity projects, as Alan calls them. But it's really great when a community can put a fund away over a number of years and then suddenly be able to, invest that lump sum into something worthwhile. So I think we did make the right decision when we agreed to go down this track rather than just pay it back to individual ratepayers. And even though there are some who are still not happy about that decision, I think the benefits will be obvious when these all come to fruition. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. So I think with that, it's Councillor Coxhead as well. Sorry.
I was just a late entrant. No, I just want to say to you, Jody, and your team, you could not have consulted anybody else, in my opinion, given the number you gave us, unless there was cats and dogs involved. That was fantastic, and I love the way our teams here in council work with those communities. And I think Pukahina and we've got so many good little communities in our area, and they work so well together. And I love the fact that these people don't just sit around and wait for things to happen to them. They make them happen themselves. So I totally applaud this community and all those little communities that get up and make things work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coxhead. Councillor Thwaites.
Yeah, I support this going forward, but I just hark back to where this fund actually has started from, and that's addressing the issue of 800 properties living on a narrow spit with a hugely degraded harbour behind it and the ocean on the other side. So this wasn't set for some community benefits like the Lolly Scramble now. That community is still facing the prospect of solving long-term wastewater area in that. So this is a drop in the ocean, a drop in the bucket, really, excuse the pun, on what they're potentially going to face to then have to fund a scheme for their place. Because, like I said, this is just a windfall from, we couldn't keep rating for something that wasn't in the plan, but this all very well talking about how good this is, but the original intention was actually to do something responsible for the environment and for that community going forward. So that hurdle is still going to be faced, possibly by another organisation other than us.
Thank you, Councillor Thwaites. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So next up, we have the on page 305, and it's the debenture trust deed amendments. Jonathan.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So this report's seeking council's approval to amend our debenture trust deed. So at the moment, every time we draw down through LGFA, we're required to provide a separate security stock certificate. So LGFA have worked through with Simpson Grierson to simplify that process. And part of this approval is to provide a global LGFA security stock certificate, meaning that we do not need to provide an individual certificate every drawdown that's done with LGFA. Happy for any questions.
Councillor Joyce, question.
Love this. Efficiency is always good. How will this be reported through to the audit committee, and should we incorporate that in the resolution saying that when this happens, it needs to be reported to the next audit committee, just so people are aware of what the process has been?
Comment on that and whether that's appropriate or.
Yeah, we can certainly add that discussion to the next staff meeting as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying 3D, that actions taken under this are reported to the next available audit committee. It was probably a tidier way of saying it, but it just complete the circle of internal audit and visibility. Not looking at any councillor in particular.
Okay, I think that's, I think you're pretty well there with the wording, but so 3D, that the council reports, report the next audit risk.
And the deed is updated, or whatever the wording would be, should be, John.
I think you've got it there. Thank you. You got that?
I'm happy to move on that basis, but yeah, if anyone else got questions.
Okay, so assuming there's other questions first. So Councillor Joyce has moved. I'm happy to second it. Any further debate? No? Oh, okay, in which case I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Next item is on page 3. Thank you, Jonathan. Page 309, and that is the appointment of Tangata Whenua representative to Smart Growth Leadership Group. Rachel.
Thank you, Mayor James. So the opportunity has arisen for Te Ihu or Te Waka or Te Arawa to nominate a representative onto the Smart Growth Leadership Group following the resignation of Jeff Rice. So council is invited to endorse the appointment of Darlene Dinsdale, who was selected by the Te Arawa Forum.
Any questions, or you want to move it? Councillor Cogsworth.
Just a question about process. So in terms of whenever anybody resigns from the Smart Growth Committee, how is that managed? How are people normally brought in? Are they, well, they're obviously not elected, and are they? So how does that normally work in terms of selection?
I'll hand over to Rachel on that one.
So there is a particular process for the Tangata Whenua members. So in terms of, so our partnership forums, so that's both Te Arawa and Tauranga Moana, have the ability to nominate through their own process, through their own sort of tikanga, who they would like to sit on the Smart Growth Leadership Group committee. And equally, so does Te Rangapu or Tauranga Moana, which is the Tauranga City Partnership Forum. And so when somebody resigns their position, it goes back to the terms of reference for those particular forums to determine the process for nominating a replacement.
So what's the process for Western Bay and TCC and all the other people? What's that process?
For, you mean for elected members?
I think we appoint at the beginning of the triennium. That's how it normally works. There does seem to be a wrinkle in this, in that it doesn't need the approval of the other members. So this seems to be a slightly unfair way of doing it, and that's something we could maybe look at in the future. But that's what we've got at the moment, and that's co-purpose today is to.
So you're on it, aren't you? You
Yes.
Yeah, and it's just you from our council?
No, it's Deputy US Scrimgeour and
Oh
Councillor
yes, of
Blades.
course. Sorry, yeah. And they were just like appointed.
That we appointed in the first meeting or second meeting.
Okay, and we voted on that, have we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Daly, I think was next.
Well, I was going to move the 4 recommendations, but I do have a question now, if I could, through you, Mayor James. Just in light of Tracy's question, and I'm not sure if it was answered or not, but like every triennium, like you say, the 3 councils obviously have to appoint new members to Smart Growth, but is there a requirement for Tangata Whenua Leadership Group to have a reappointment process at the start of the triennium?
No, there isn't the same requirement, because Smart Growth actually endures over the triennium. There only is for our elected members.
So the Tangata Whenua members are just it's purely up to the appointees, appointing agencies or hapu and iwi groups to decide if they want to change their members.
Correct.
Councillor Ray.
I was just indicating that I'll be happy to move or second when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murray-Binge.
I just need an assurance, Rachel, that both forums were happy with this nomination.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So both forums, Councillor Murray-Binge, have they take their own decisions within their own forum. So the Tauranga Moana Forum nominates their representative, and they have their own sort of tino rangatiratanga around that. So Te Arawa does not comment on who Tauranga Moana nominates, and nor does that happen the other way.
I'm a bit lost.
Okay, so this is the this is Te Ihu o Te Waka o Te Arawa representative. Tauranga Moana have a different representative.
And all I'm asking is, were the western end of our district forums happy with that decision?
I don't think that's not really
I
an
didn't.
appropriate question to ask in the same way. Am I happy with Tauranga's representative? It's
They
not my
participate in
business.
the process. sir.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
They're separate.
So because the person came from Te Arawa, they were able to nominate their replacement.
Te Arawa gets a rep. Tauranga Moana gets a rep. They each not choose their own reps, and it's a completely separate process. They each get a seat, yes.
Mr. Mayor, it's just exactly the same as councils. We don't get to comment on who TCC appoints to Smart Growth or who the regional council appoints to Smart Growth. So in the same way, the Maori forums don't comment on the other body's recommendation.
Okay, I think Councillor Ray indicated she'd like to move this. Councillor Daly, do you want to second that?
Well, I did indicate I'd like to move it, but I'm happy for Laura to move this one. So I'm happy to second it.
Okay, great. Is there any speakers on this one now? Councillor Daly?
Yes, I'm happy to support the nominate or the appointment of a strong wahine and Darlene Dinsdale from Te Arawa. And I know that she will be very diligent and ask many probing questions of the Smart Growth Leadership Group.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No? So I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So lastly, we've got my report to council, which is on page 311. My intention is that we go through this and then we move to the confidential, and then we'll break for lunch before we crack into that side of things. So page 311, it's my report. I'll take it as read, but if there's any questions, then happy to take them. Councillor Joyce.
Just picked up on a couple in there that I thought would be good to hear a bit more about if you've got time. S&P Global, we met them on the 14th of May, and they obviously are fairly big stakeholders in our debt in terms of rating it. And also I see that our friends at
Should we do one at a time?
Yeah, cool. Yep.
Councillor Joyce. Okay, yes, so I met alongside, I think Miriam, and I'm sure Adele was in there, and possibly Jonathan as well, to discuss, our council on where we're going and how things are looking. It was a pretty positive meeting. I'd met those people before, and it's just a continuation of that, and they seem to be generally happy. I think there was a potential for the rating downgrade the other councils have experienced to catch up with us, but we'll see what happens in that regard.
I was going to ask you about that. I just realised in the CEO's list, unfortunately, she popped out. But I see Thunder Ridge have been back, but perhaps I can take that offline.
Sorry, which was the quick
question? I think it's actually on the CEO's list rather than your list.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm keen to know what's happening there.
Okay, I'm sure you can ask her this afternoon. And Councillor Murray Benj.
Sir, just one comment. When we withdrew from the Local Government Association, one of the arguments we had was that we had good MPs from both sides of the table, and we could work with them as a council. And when Kieran McNulty was the Minister of Local Government, he met with we councillors, and I felt that that was really worthwhile. And you have met with Simon Watts and Tom Rutherford, and Tom tells me they asked to meet with the council, and they only met with you and your deputy. And I think that in future, whoever is the Minister of Local Government, we should all be meeting with them. And I thought the rapport that we had with Kieran McNulty, never mind whether he didn't continue or not, but he set a standard. And that has been lost. And I'm so disappointed because we have got a network within our district and we should be using our MPs. And we know that the Minister of Local Government has got his batch up at Waihi Beach. And we should be, all councillors round this table, be able to question and to ask advice from him and the local MPs. So I just wish to express my grave concern that that's not happening.
Okay,
And it should.
Okay, so just on that list there, so that was organised in Rotorua, so that was the BOP mayors. That was on the 15th of May. In regard to other visits, it will vary. I think the next meeting between Tom and Sam, I think would be appropriate to involve a wider audience. I'm happy to do that. I think I did also, there was an offer from the Labour local government spokesperson to meet, so I could make that happen. It's getting a bit late in the triennium, but we could certainly do that if that's what you want.
When in fact they are part of the government, that makes sense, which Kieran McNulty was, and he was the Minister of Local Government, met with all of us, and that was a standard that should have been continued. And so, and I repeat, having withdrawn from the Local Government Association, it's really important that we work with our MPs and lobby through them directly with central government. It's to rely on you only and your deputy isn't the council itself. And I'm all for making sure that we councillors have the roles and the responsibilities that we should have. And in that regard, I put a failure on that one, sir.
As I said, it will vary. Sometimes it's appropriate to involve everyone, sometimes not. It just depends on the situation. Okay. So, any other questions? No. Okay. I'm happy to move my report. Councillor Sol, would you like to second it? Thank you. Seeing there's no further debate on this one, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So with no information for receipt, I'd like a mover and seconder to exclude the public so we can discuss the confidential agenda. Councillor Murray Benge, Councillor Thwaites,